Karen had always believed that a person should chase the things that thrilled them, even if the world around them insisted on taking life a little too seriously. He grew up in a house where the sound of engines was as familiar as the tick of a clock. His father was a mechanic who could coax life back into anything with four wheels, and his mother, despite pretending to be indifferent, had her own fondness for off-roading and the culture that came with it. Their dining table conversations were full of horsepower, gears, mud trails, and the freedom of open roads. So it was no surprise to anyone who knew him that, years later, after moving into the somewhat rigid and meticulously regulated neighborhood of Willow Peak Estates, Karen would try something that did not fit into its carefully constructed image of quiet lawns, trimmed hedges, and ornamental mailboxes. It started as a loose idea, a friendly Jeep rally with his local off-roading group who often gathered on weekends. He had hosted barbecues before, small gatherings, even a workshop afternoon where he taught kids how engines worked. Nobody complained much back then. But a Jeep rally? That was a different beast entirely. The thought first grew roots one late Sunday evening, after Karen returned from a breathtaking off-road trail through the Red Ridge Valley. The sunset had left streaks of molten gold across the sky, the earth was still smelling of dust and adventure, and he felt the restlessness he often felt after a great ride, a craving to share that feeling with others. The memory of driving along rocky edges, maneuvering through narrow ravines, and helping other drivers through tricky spots filled him with an indescribable joy. The valley had echoed with laughter, engines, and camaraderie. It was the life he loved. What if, he wondered, he could recreate a piece of that wonder here? He wasn't planning anything wild. Just a small rally that would start in the neighborhood cul-de-sac, follow the public dirt road beyond Willow Peak, make a loop along the outskirts of the valley, and return. No racing, no reckless stunts. Just a controlled, safe event that would let people, even those who'd never been in a Jeep before, feel the thrill. He imagined kids cheering, neighbors gathering on porches, drivers chatting excitedly, and maybe even a community barbecue afterward. It didn't seem unrealistic. It didn't seem threatening. It seemed fun. But Willow Peak Estates was run by the HOA, the Homeowners Association, whose rulebook was thicker than some religious scriptures, updated often, and enforced with zeal. They liked things quiet, orderly, predictable. They had rules about acceptable mailbox colors, rules about fence height, even rules about how long a garage door could be left open. The neighborhood was beautiful, no doubt, but sometimes Karen felt like it was more curated than lived in. Still, he wanted the rally. So he approached it the right way. 3 days after his idea took shape, Karen printed a proposal and walked into the HOA office, a surprisingly formal building for something that managed lawns and mailboxes. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and disinfectant. Behind the reception desk sat a woman named Patricia, who had a permanent smile that didn't seem to reach her eyes. She was the kind of person who hosted book clubs, sent reminder emails at 6 a.m., and always had an opinion about everyone's front yard. "Hi, Patricia," Karen said, handing her the envelope. "This is a proposal for a small neighborhood event I'd like to organize." She opened it immediately. Patricia was incapable of leaving anything unread for longer than 5 seconds, and her smile faltered slightly as she skimmed the words. "A Jeep rally," she said slowly, as if the term were foreign. "In the neighborhood?" "Well, it begins in the neighborhood," he clarified. "Everything else is outside the community boundaries. No damage, no noise beyond the start and end, and I've attached the safety measures, too. I'll take care of all logistics." Patricia pressed her lips into a line. "I'll bring it to the board." That was the beginning. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a quiet tug-of-war. Karen tried to stay optimistic, convinced that his careful planning would reassure them. He had diagrams, risk assessments, timing breakdowns, and even letters from participants promising responsible behavior. He had also gathered signatures from neighbors who supported the idea, some enthusiastic, some indifferent but willing to humor him. But the HOA board was less easily charmed. During the first meeting, held in a large rectangular room with fluorescent lights and serious expressions, the board raised concerns about noise, potential property damage, traffic disruptions, and the precedent it might set. One board member, Mr. Holloway, spoke as though a Jeep rally were equivalent to unleashing a herd of wild animals into the streets. "I understand safety measures have been proposed," he said, adjusting his glasses, "but the nature of this event is fundamentally disruptive to the peace and expectations of our community." Karen tried to counter, calmly and logically. "It's a one-day event, limited to a few hours. We're using vehicles on public roads. Everything is coordinated, and it could bring neighbors together. There's value in that." Value did not seem to be something they were interested in. The meeting ended with an ambiguous, "We'll review this further." Word spread quickly through Willow Peak, faster than it should have, considering only 3 people had been inside that meeting besides him. Neighbors stopped Karen during his morning jogs, while he worked on his Jeep in his driveway, even when he picked up mail. Some supported him wholeheartedly. "It would be fun," said Mr. Douglas, a retired pilot who missed anything that smelled like adventure. "This place is too stiff sometimes. I say go for it." "I want to bring my kids," said a young mother named Priya, her eyes gleaming. "They've never been in a Jeep. They'd love it." Others, however, were more hesitant. "Will it be loud?" asked a woman walking her dog. "I heard engines could crack the pavement," whispered another neighbor, absurdly. Someone said that in the group chat. Karen tried to correct misinformation, but rumor spread faster than truth. A few anonymous posts in the HOA forum depicted the rally as an apocalyptic threat. Someone even posted an edited photo of Jeeps tearing through flower beds, which made him laugh at first, until he realized some people were taking it seriously. Things escalated when the HOA board sent an official letter of opposition. It arrived on crisp, heavy paper, the kind that smelled faintly of importance and unnecessary formality. The HOA board does not approve the proposed Jeep rally event due to concerns regarding community disruption, noise, safety hazards, and potential property impact. That was it. No consideration of the data he had given them. No acknowledgement of his efforts. A normal person, perhaps, would have stopped there. But Karen's stubbornness was something of a legend among those who truly knew him. He read the letter twice, leaned back in his chair and muttered, "No, not like this." He was not trying to break rules. He respected structure and order when they made sense. But this wasn't about rules. It was about rigidity for the sake of rigidity, and it gnawed at him. So he dug deeper. He combed through the HOA bylaws, not with the intention of finding loopholes, but with the intention of finding clarity. And clarity he found, specifically in a subsection most board members probably forgot existed. The HOA had the right to regulate community events that took place within HOA-managed property. But the roads where the rally would run? They belonged to the county. And the cul-de-sac where he planned to gather the group? It was technically public access, maintained by the county, merely adjacent to HOA property. He submitted a permit application to the county, attaching all the information he had originally shared with the HOA. The county took a more balanced view. They reviewed it, asked for a few additional details, and eventually gave him conditional approval, provided safety guidelines were enforced. Armed with that, he informed the HOA, politely, that while he appreciated their concerns, he had the legal right to proceed. The fury of the board could have powered a small city. They sent more letters, emails, strongly worded advisories. Patricia even came to his home personally with a printed packet entitled Potential Consequences of Unauthorized Community Activities, which Karen accepted with a grin, thanked her for, and set aside without opening. Meanwhile, support among neighbors grew. People liked seeing someone stand up to the overbearing rules they'd grown tired of. Some offered help. Some offered snacks. Some offered to join the rally just for the fun of it, even if they had to borrow a Jeep. The HOA tried one last tactic, fear. They sent an email claiming that if anything went wrong, Karen would bear sole responsibility. But he had already addressed liability in his county permit and had insurance documents ready. The board, it seemed, had run out of ammunition. The morning of the rally arrived with a crisp breeze and a sky washed in soft blue. The cul-de-sac buzzed with energy long before the engines started. Jeeps of every color and model lined the street. Classic Wranglers, shiny Rubicons, a few modified beasts with oversized tires, and even one old CJ7 restored so beautifully it looked like a museum piece. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, holding coffee cups, wrapped in jackets, chatting excitedly. Children pointed with wide-eyed delight. Someone brought muffins. Someone else set up a small speaker playing upbeat music. Karen arrived early, wearing a faded jacket and his favorite cap. He was nervous, not about the rally itself, but about the confrontation he knew was coming. Sure enough, at almost exactly 8 a.m., Patricia appeared, flanked by 2 HOA board members. She looked like she'd walked into a construction site without a hard hat. "Karen," she said, her voice struggling between authority and disbelief, "you cannot proceed with this." "I can," he said, keeping his tone friendly. "I have the county's permit. This road is public access. But this is disruptive to the community." Karen gestured around. "Is it? Look at them." The neighbors, dozens of them, watched silently, united in an unsaid but clear message. Many had supported him quietly, but seeing them there in person was something else entirely. Patricia swallowed. "We do not approve this event." "I understand," he said. "But that doesn't mean it can't happen." For a moment, she seemed ready to argue further. But then something shifted. Maybe the realization that she was outnumbered, or that she had done everything she could and pushing further would only sour things more. She tightened her grip on a stack of papers and turned away, her heels clicking sharply as she retreated with the other board members. Karen let out a long breath. The crowd erupted into applause. At 9 a.m., engines rumbled to life, filling the air with a symphony of excitement. The jeeps rolled forward, one by one, like a parade of mechanical beasts eager for adventure. Karen led the way, waving to the children who cheered from their driveways. The rally moved smoothly from the neighborhood and onto the rocky outskirts, where the real trail began. The ride was everything he had imagined and more. Drivers helped one another through tricky slopes. A convoy of colorful jeeps snaked across hills, kicking up dust that glittered in the sunlight. Laughter mingled with the roar of engines. Even the county ranger who monitored the event nearby seemed impressed with how well organized it was. By the time they returned, the sun had shifted toward the west, and the cul-de-sac once again filled with excited voices. People chatted, shared photos, compared experiences, and devoured snacks someone had generously set out. It was perfect. Even the HOA couldn't argue with what had happened. Peacefully, legally, joyfully. They made no further attempts to challenge the rally. In fact, some board members softened afterward, though they would never admit it was because they realized they had been unreasonable. For weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with the memory of the event. Children asked when the next one would be. Adults who'd never cared about jeeps suddenly wanted to ride in one. The tension that had hung over Willow Peak like an invisible veil loosened. At the next HOA meeting, someone jokingly suggested an annual community adventure day. Patricia pretended not to hear. Karen didn't host another rally immediately. He believed in choosing battles wisely. But he knew one thing for sure. The neighborhood had changed. A little freer. A little braver. A little less afraid of noise, laughter, or harmless fun. And as he sat on his porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in molten gold, much like the one that had sparked the idea, he felt profoundly satisfied. Not because he had won against the HOA, but because he had brought people together. Because he had stayed true to what he loved. Because sometimes, all it took was one stubborn person with a big idea and a bigger heart to remind a community that life was meant to be lived, loudly, joyfully, fearlessly. And yes, occasionally, with the rumble of Jeep engines echoing through the air.